When my mom invited me to a family dinner after years of barely talking, I thought maybe, just maybe, we were finally healing. But when I arrived, there was no place for me at the table. Stay with me till the end, because what happened that night still plays in my mind like a movie I can't turn off. And if my story hits your heart, don't forget to show some love and share it with someone who needs to hear it. I remember getting the call on a quiet Wednesday evening. Mom's voice sounded softer than usual, almost sweet. She said, "Leah, we're having a special family dinner this weekend. I'd love for you to come." My heart actually skipped. After years of cold silences and half-hearted texts, maybe this was her way of saying she missed me. I told myself, don't overthink it. Just go. Saturday came faster than I expected. I spent hours choosing a simple dress, not too fancy, just something nice. The drive to my childhood home felt strange. Every street was heavy with memories. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed extra cars parked outside. For a second, I smiled. "Wow, everyone's here," I whispered. Maybe it really was a family reunion. But when I opened the door, laughter filled the air. Everyone was already seated around the big wooden table. My mom, my stepdad, my younger sister Amber, and even her fiancé. Plates of food covered the table, steaming, golden, perfect. For a moment, I just stood there, waiting for someone to notice me. Mom finally looked up, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. "Oh, Leah, you're here early," she said. I froze. I wasn't early, I was right on time. My eyes swept the table, and that's when I saw it. There was no chair for me. No plate, no napkin, nothing. Just laughter and full plates around me, like I was invisible. I forced a smile. "Should I grab a chair?" I asked quietly. Amber looked down, avoiding my eyes. Mom waved her hand. No, honey, it's fine. Just sit on that stool near the corner." She pointed to the old kitchen stool. The same one I used to sit on as a kid when they didn't have space for me back then either. So I sat, watching everyone eat. They talked about vacations, Amber's engagement, Mom's new husband's retirement. Every word made me feel smaller, like I wasn't really part of the family anymore, just a visitor with no place. I tried to smile, but inside, something in me broke quietly. I realized that dinner wasn't about healing. It was just another reminder. I was never really part of their picture. I was the extra piece they didn't know where to fit. That night, as I stared at their laughter, I promised myself something. This would be the last time I ever sat at a table that didn't have space for me. I stood there for a few seconds, waiting for someone to acknowledge me, but the room suddenly felt colder. Mom's words still echoed in my ears. "Oh, Leah, we didn't know you were coming so early." I checked my phone, 6 p.m. sharp. The time she herself had told me. My chest tightened, but I smiled anyway, pretending I didn't notice the lie. She motioned to the stool by the kitchen counter. "You can sit there for now. We're a bit crowded tonight." Crowded? That was her excuse. I looked around the table. There was space, if they wanted there to be. But no one offered to shift a chair or make room. Not Amber, not her fiancé, not even my mother's new husband, Richard, who barely looked at me. As I sat on that hard stool, the smell of roasted chicken and garlic butter filled the air, but it didn't comfort me. It only made me aware of the empty plate in front of me. When Mom finally remembered, she handed me a paper plate from the kitchen drawer. Everyone else had fine china, glossy white with gold rims. The kind she used to keep locked in the cabinet, saying they were for special occasions. Apparently, I wasn't part of the special occasion. "So," Richard said, raising his glass, "to retirement and new beginnings." Everyone clapped and cheered. I froze. Retirement? I had no idea this dinner was for him. My invitation had made it sound like a family get-together, a chance to reconnect. Now I realized it wasn't about family at all. It was about celebrating a man I barely knew, in a home that didn't feel like mine anymore. Amber caught my eye and gave me a small, guilty smile before turning back to her fiancé. I could tell she wanted to say something, but she didn't. Maybe she was used to this silence too. Maybe she'd learned that speaking up for me wasn't worth the tension it caused. I poked at the food Mom had served me, small portions, as if she were rationing kindness. Everyone else talked over each other, laughing, clinking glasses, sharing stories. I laughed once out of habit, but no one heard. I might as well have been invisible. Halfway through the meal, Mom looked at me and said, "Leah, how's your little decorating thing going?" She didn't even remember the name of my business. I told her, quietly, that I was working on a cafe project downtown. She nodded absent-mindedly and turned to Amber. asking about her upcoming wedding. The whole table lit up again. I smiled to hide the sting, but my heart felt like glass cracking under pressure. I had come hoping to be seen, to be included. But here I was, sitting on a stool, eating off paper, watching the people I once called family treat me like a distant guest. In that moment, it hit me. I wasn't really invisible. They saw me. They just chose to look away. As I sat there on the stool, half listening to their laughter, memories started creeping in like old ghosts I'd tried to forget. This wasn't new. I'd seen this scene before, just with different clothes, different years. Amber, the golden one, sitting beside Mom, glowing with attention. Me, always somewhere on the edge, trying to prove I was enough. I remember when we were kids, Amber would draw messy stick figures, and Mom would clap like she'd painted the Mona Lisa. But when I brought home an art project that won a school prize, Mom barely looked at it. She'd just say, "That's nice, Leah, but don't get ahead of yourself." Back then, I didn't understand what she meant. Now I did. She meant stay small. The same pattern never stopped. Amber was soft-spoken, always nodding, always agreeing. I, on the other hand, questioned things. I spoke up when Mom was unfair, when she made decisions for US without asking. That was my biggest crime, having a voice. And the day I finally shouted back, saying I wouldn't let her control my life anymore, she told me to pack my things. I did. That night, I left home with one suitcase and a wallet that barely held $20. Amber stayed, of course. She was the daughter who never said no. She still lived just 10 minutes away from Mom's house. Her fiancé worked for Richard's company, the same man Mom married after Dad died. Amber's life was perfectly set. An apartment they helped her get, a shiny car, a job arranged through connections. Everything came easy for her. Me? I worked 2 jobs through college, barely sleeping. I remember eating instant noodles for weeks just to pay rent. But even when things got hard, I kept going. I built a small life for myself, a tiny apartment, a quiet space where I didn't have to tiptoe around anyone. Yet sitting there that night, watching my mother beam at Amber across the table, I realized she still saw me as the mistake. The one who made her look bad. The one who walked away. Mom turned to Amber with pride in her eyes. "You've always been such a blessing," she said softly. Then her gaze slid to me, empty and distant, like I was some old friend she hadn't seen in years. "Leah, it's good to see you too," she added quickly, her tone polite but cold. That simple sentence cut deeper than I expected. "Good to see you too," I replied, forcing a smile. But I could feel the distance between us stretching wider, like an invisible wall. I looked at Amber, all dressed up, glowing under the warm lights. And then I looked down at my paper plate, half empty, and thought, this is how it's always been. She's the golden child. I'm the forgotten one. And no matter how much I've grown, no matter how far I've come, to my mother, I'll always be the daughter who left instead of the one who stayed. I tried to keep my smile steady through dinner, but every word from the table felt heavier. I was nodding at jokes I didn't find funny, pretending not to notice how every story began with "Amber did this," or "Amber said that." I told myself to hold on a little longer, that maybe the night would get better. But deep down, something already felt wrong. When Mom and Amber got up to get dessert, I followed them with my eyes. They disappeared into the kitchen, their voices low but sharp enough for a few words to slip through. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I just froze when I heard my name. "She would have found out anyway," Amber whispered. Mom sighed. "I didn't want to invite her, Amber. You know how she makes things awkward." Amber's tone softened. "I know, Mom. But Nathan wanted everyone there for the family photo before the wedding announcement. He said it wouldn't look right if my sister wasn't included." I felt my heart drop. My body went numb, as if someone had pulled the floor out from under me. I wasn't here because they missed me. I wasn't here because they wanted to make peace. I was here because of a picture. A picture they'd frame, post online, and pretend meant something. My hands trembled on my lap. I blinked fast, trying not to let the tears spill. The room suddenly felt suffocating, like the air itself was too heavy to breathe. I pushed my chair back quietly and whispered, "Excuse me," to no one in particular. No one even looked up. I walked down the hall to the bathroom and shut the door behind me. The moment the lock clicked, the first tear fell. Then another. And another. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stop the sound, but a small sob escaped anyway. I slid down to the floor, staring at the tiles, the same ones I used to clean as a teenager whenever Mom was angry. From the dining room, I could still hear them laughing. The sound stabbed straight through me, bright, cheerful, and cruelly normal. It was like the world outside that door didn't care I was breaking apart just a few feet away. I finally stood up, catching my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were red and glassy. My face looked tired, older than it should. I didn't even recognize the girl staring back. I wiped my tears with shaking hands and whispered to my reflection, "Never again. Never again would I let them use me. Never again would I walk into a room hoping for love from people who only saw me as decoration." I took one deep breath, fixed my hair, and walked out of that bathroom with my head high. But inside, something had changed. Whatever hope I had left for my family died that night, quietly behind that locked door. I stepped out of the bathroom, my eyes dry but my chest burning. The sound of laughter hit me again, but this time it didn't hurt, it just felt empty. I walked back toward the dining room, and no one even looked up. They were still chatting, forks clinking, glasses full, the perfect picture of a happy family. And me? I was invisible, just like always. I stood there for a second, taking it all in. The lights, the smell of food, the sound of Amber's laughter mixing with Mom's voice. It should have felt like home. Instead, it felt like a museum of a life I no longer belonged to. I didn't say a word. I just turned quietly, walked to the entryway, and grabbed my coat from the hook. The night air hit my face as I stepped outside. It was cool, sharp, honest. I took a deep breath, almost like I'd been holding it in for years. The porch light flickered above me, and for a moment, I thought someone might follow, Mom, Amber, anyone. But no one did. By the time I reached my car, I could still hear their laughter through the open window. It echoed like a cruel reminder of everything I wasn't part of. I slid into the driver's seat, turned the key, and watched the house in my rearview mirror. My childhood home. The same place where I'd cried into my pillow, begged to be seen, tried so hard to earn love that should have been free. I didn't honk, didn't slam the door, didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I just drove away. The sound of the tires on the gravel was the only goodbye I needed. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I didn't want to look, but curiosity won. It was a text from Mom. "You could have stayed longer. It was rude to leave." That was it. "No, are you okay?" "No, I'm sorry." Just another reminder that somehow, even my pain was an inconvenience to her. I stared at the message until the letters blurred, then pressed delete. The road ahead was dark, but it felt more peaceful than that house ever did. I rolled the window down and let the wind hit my face. I whispered to myself, no more. No more trying to earn love that was never meant for me. No more waiting for apologies that would never come. No more sitting on stools while everyone else had a seat at the table. As I drove through the quiet streets, I made a promise to stop chasing their approval and start building something of my own. I didn't know how yet, but I knew one thing for sure. One day they'd see me. Not because I begged for their attention, but because I became someone they could never ignore. And for the first time in years, that thought made me smile. The months after that dinner were quiet. Too quiet. Some nights, I'd sit on my couch, staring at my phone, half expecting a message from Mom or Amber. None ever came. And somewhere between the silence and the hurt, I realized something. I didn't need them to call. I needed to start calling myself back to life. I had always loved design. Even as a kid, I'd rearrange furniture in my tiny room just to make it feel new. So one morning, I decided to turn that love into something real. I opened my laptop, created a simple page, and called it Leah Porter Interiors. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The first few months were rough. I took whatever I could get, tiny apartment makeovers, coffee shop revamps, even a daycare that could barely afford to pay me. But with every job, my hands learned, my vision sharpened, and my confidence grew. The more I worked, the less I thought about the empty chair at that dinner. Slowly, the pain started to turn into fuel. One day, while fixing up a small cafe downtown, I met Daniel Holt. He was the owner's friend and stopped by to check on the progress. He noticed me sketching on the counter and asked, "Did you come up with all this yourself?" I nodded shyly. "Yeah, just trying to make the space feel lighter." He smiled. "Well, it already feels different. You've got a gift." Those words stuck with me. It had been years since anyone had said something kind without an agenda. Daniel started referring clients to me, friends, business owners, people looking for a fresh touch. He never asked for anything in return. He just believed in me. And that belief, simple as it was, began to rebuild something inside me that had been broken for a long time. Soon, I was busier than I ever expected. My designs started showing up in magazines and online features. Strangers were reaching out, wanting me to work on their spaces. For the first time in my life, people saw me, not as a burden, not as someone in the background, but as someone who created beauty. I rented a small office, painted it in warm tones, and hung a single photo on the wall, an empty chair at a long table. It wasn't there to remind me of pain. It was there to remind me that I didn't need someone to make space for me. I could build my own. Daniel became a close friend. We'd meet for coffee after work, talking about dreams, laughing about little things. He never pushed, never pitted, just listened. And one evening, as I looked around my finished studio, sunlight pouring in through the windows, I realized I wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. I had created something from nothing. My own place. My own peace. My own table. 2 years passed faster than I expected. Life had changed in ways I never imagined possible. I had clients who trusted me, a small team that looked up to me, and a quiet peace I never thought I'd feel again. The girl who once left her mother's house in tears was gone. In her place stood a woman who had built her own table, her own life, and her own worth. Then, one ordinary afternoon, my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in a long time. Mom. For a moment, my hands froze above the screen. My heart didn't race like it used to, but there was still that faint ache, a ghost of the old wound. I opened the message. Amber's wedding is coming up next month. We really want you there, Leah. It would mean a lot. I stared at the words for a while, half expecting there to be more. No apology. No warmth. Just an invitation coated with obligation. Still, something in the way she said we really want you there felt almost desperate. I didn't reply immediately. For days, I kept rereading the message, trying to decide if I should even go. Part of me whispered, you owe them nothing. But another part, quieter and stronger, said, you're not going for them. You're going for yourself. When I finally responded, I kept it simple. I'll be there. In the weeks that followed, I prepared, not for a fight, not for tears, but for closure. I wanted to walk into that room and show them that I no longer needed a seat at their table. I had built something far better. The morning of the wedding rehearsal dinner, I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting my emerald green dress. It hugged my figure perfectly, elegant but not loud. My hair flowed in soft waves, and for once, I didn't feel like I was dressing to impress anyone. I was simply showing up as myself. As I looked at my reflection, a quiet smile curved my lips. The last time I saw my mother, I left her house with tears in my eyes and a promise in my heart that one day they would see the woman they tried to ignore. And that day had finally come. Daniel, who had become more than a friend over the years, offered to drive me. As we pulled into the familiar driveway, my stomach didn't twist like before. Instead, I felt calm, centered. The house looked the same, but I didn't. I walked up those steps not as the forgotten daughter, but as someone who had learned her worth the hard way. I wasn't there to prove anything, and I wasn't there to beg for love. I was there to close a chapter. With grace, with confidence, and with the quiet kind of revenge that comes from simply being whole. When I walked into that restaurant, the entire room went silent for half a breath. I could feel every pair of eyes turned toward me, their surprise almost tangible. I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. The deep green dress I wore shimmered softly under the warm lights, the color of quiet power. My heels clicked confidently across the floor as I walked in, holding my head high, carrying the grace I had built out of years of pain. Amber was the first to approach. Her smile was tight, the kind that tried to hide uncertainty. "Leah, you look amazing," she said, her voice light but trembling at the edges. "Thank you, Amber," I replied with a gentle smile. "Congratulations on your big day." For a moment, she just stared at me, as if trying to find traces of the girl she used to mock. But that girl was gone. I could see the confusion flicker across her face before she turned to introduce me to her fiancé, Brandon. He extended a polite hand, and I could feel his genuine warmth. "I've heard a lot about you," he said. "Hopefully the good things," I answered lightly. He laughed, the kind of laugh that broke the tension in the air. As we took our seats, I noticed my mother, Diane, at the far end of the table. Her face was stiff, her eyes sharp and assessing. She wasn't used to seeing me like this, composed, glowing, untouchable. I could almost hear her thoughts. When did she become this woman? Dinner began with laughter and light conversation, but soon the tone shifted. People began asking questions about my business, the nonprofit I had started, the speaking engagements I'd done overseas. I wasn't bragging, I was simply answering. Still, Every word seemed to chip away at the image they'd painted of me years ago. Amber's friends leaned in closer. Her future in-laws listened with genuine interest. Even Brandon kept glancing my way, smiling when I spoke. It wasn't romantic, it was respect. The kind that can't be bought, only earned. I caught Diane trying to steer the attention back to Amber. Well, Amber's been doing great at her new company too, she said, her voice almost forced. Amber smiled weakly, but the conversation slipped back toward me. Every attempt my mother made to redirect it fell flat. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for it. As dessert arrived, I looked around the table, the people who once made me feel small now hanging on my words. My heart didn't swell with pride, but with peace. I hadn't come to show off. I had come to stand tall in the same room that once tried to break me. When Diane finally caught my eyes, I simply smiled, calm, kind, and untouchable. And in that silence, I realized that dignity was the sweetest revenge of all. The photographer called everyone over for pictures, his cheerful voice echoing through the hall. All right, let's get the family together. Bride's side first. People began to shuffle around, adjusting dresses, fixing ties, touching up lipstick. I stood quietly near the edge of the room, watching the familiar choreography of belonging, something I'd always been left out of. Diane was already at the center, Amber beside her, glowing in her white rehearsal gown. Then Diane looked up and caught my eye. Her smile faltered for a second. "Leah, why don't you stand there?" she said, motioning vaguely to the far right. Out of the spotlight, out of the frame, just like always. I nodded, calm as ever, and took the spot she'd chosen for me. The old Leah would have felt that familiar sting, the invisible burn of being the afterthought, the unwanted piece in a perfect family portrait. But tonight, that pain didn't control me anymore. Before the photographer could snap the first shot, Brandon, Amber's fiancé, frowned slightly. "Wait," he said, his voice kind but firm. "That doesn't look right." Everyone turned to him. He walked over, scanning the group, and then gestured toward me. "Leah, come to the middle," he said. "You're Amber's sister. You should be beside her. It's her big day, and family should stand together." The room went silent for a heartbeat. Diane's smile froze on her face, brittle as glass. Amber shifted uncomfortably, glancing between her mother and me. "Oh, that's fine," I said softly, trying to make it easy for them. "Really, I can." But Brandon shook his head. "No, please," he said gently. "You belong here." Something inside me, that small, long-buried ache, eased. Slowly, I stepped forward, every click of my heels echoing through the tension. I stood beside Amber, meeting her uncertain smile with one of quiet grace. The photographer grinned. "Perfect. Hold that." The flash went off. For the first time in years, I was in the center of the frame, not because I demanded it, but because someone finally saw I deserved to be there. Diane's jaw was tight, her eyes unreadable. She pressed a strained smile, whispering to Amber as the photographer prepared for another shot. But I didn't care to hear the words. The laughter returned, the room buzzed again, and as another photo was taken, I simply breathed. I didn't feel triumphant or superior, just free. I wasn't standing there to prove anything. I didn't need their validation anymore. I had built my own table, my own life, my own peace. As the final flash went off, I realized something powerful. They could keep their selective love, their staged perfection. I had found something deeper, self-worth that didn't require permission to exist. And this time, when I smiled, it was real. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The same cracked driveway, the same chipped paint on the porch railing. Yet somehow, it all felt foreign now. I parked by the curb and sat in the car for a while, watching the windows glow faintly from inside. Laughter drifted out, familiar and distant at the same time. In the passenger seat beside me was the small box I had brought. Inside, wrapped carefully in white paper, was the gift. I took a deep breath, picked it up, and stepped out into the quiet evening air. Each step toward that front door felt lighter than the one before. I wasn't nervous this time. I wasn't angry either. I was just done. When I reached the porch, I knocked softly. After a few seconds, I heard her voice, my mother's voice, from the other side of the door. "Leah." I didn't answer right away. I set the box down neatly by the door. On top of it was a note in my handwriting, folded once, clean and simple. Then I stood there for just a moment longer, staring at the home that had once been everything to me and nothing all at once. The door opened a crack. Diane's face appeared, surprise flickering across her features. "Leah, what are you doing here?" she asked. "I just came to drop something off," I said quietly. My tone was calm, steady. No blame, no plea, just peace. She bent down and picked up the box, unwrapping it right there in the doorway. Inside was a framed photograph, one taken years ago, back when our family used to gather around the dinner table. My father still alive, Amber laughing, and me sitting at the edge, half out of frame. Only this photo was different. The chair where I once sat was empty, edited out. In its place, the faint words were printed at the bottom. Don't worry, Mom. I found my own place. For a moment, Diane didn't speak. Her eyes glistened, confusion flickering into something like guilt. Leah, she started, reaching out. But I was already turning away. Her voice followed me down the porch steps. Leah, wait! I paused at the bottom, my hand on the car door. For a second, I thought about looking back, about giving her that one last chance. But then I remembered every dinner, every silence, every missing chair. And I knew this was the ending I needed. I'm okay, Mom, I said softly, without turning around. Then I got into my car, started the engine, and pulled away. The rearview mirror caught the shrinking image of the house, the porch light glowing, my mother still standing there. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. I felt like I was finally going somewhere. Somewhere I belonged. Do you think Leah made the right choice by walking away and finding peace on her own? Or should she have given her family another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd really love to hear them. And if stories like this touch your heart, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next one.